All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So our next presenters are Doug Sweat and Cam Morris. So Cam is the Intelligent Transportation Systems Design Manager in TDOT Headquarters, Traffic Design Division. In this position, he leads the planning and design efforts for ITS projects statewide that support the existing TDOT Smart Waste system and further advance the research and use of emerging technology to help address the state's transportation challenges. Prior to this role, Cam was a traffic design engineer for 8 years, developing in-house design plans and managing consultant design projects for various intersections across the state. Cam is a licensed professional engineer and has earned his degree in civil engineering with a bachelor's from the University of Kentucky and a master's from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. He and his wife, Victoria, live in Mount Juliet with their two sons, Ivan, age 6, and Archer, age 2. In his spare time, he can be found building Lego creations with his kids, hanging out at the park with his family, listening to music, or playing rugby. Doug Sweat is a transportation engineer with 19 years of experience. Doug has spent all 19 years of his career at Kimley Horn. He works in the Transportation Planning and Traffic Operations Group in Memphis. He is a licensed engineer in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, and a roadway safety professional level 1. Since joining the firm in 2006, Doug has contributed to diverse projects encompassing community transportation plans, traffic signal designs, ITS planning and design, and safety action plans. Doug has been married to Holly for 18 years, and they have 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl, the oldest of which will start driving next year. Please join me in welcoming Cam Morris and Doug Sweat.
All right, thank you, Terrence, and thanks everybody for having us here today. Again, I'm Cam Morris. I'm the ITS Design Manager with TDOT. I'm really excited to share with you all the TDOT Runway Prevention Technology Pilot Project along I-40 and I-240 in Memphis. This project was a collaboration between TDOT as the owner and operator of the system, and also Kimley Horn as the main designer, systems and engineering analysis development for the project. So I'll kick us off with some project background. I'll pass it over to Doug to get into some fun, detailed design of the project, and then I'll end with some project schedule and next steps for TDOT. So really this project began with Tennessee being on one of the top 10 states for wrong-way driving fatalities in 2014. In terms of being on a list of top 10 states, that's definitely not where we want to be. Fast forward a little bit to 2016 and 2017, TDOT experienced some elevated wrong-way driving crashes, at least trends from observational, things from TMCs, TDOT staff, just really noticing a lot of wrong-way driving incidents without any real investigation into those. So that kicked off a actual formal investigation into wrong-way prevention technologies and systems. If you all are provided this presentation later, this is a link to a report that was actually developed in May of 2021. This report had 2 major goals. Number 1, to investigate wrong-way crashes in Tennessee, so really to nail down exactly what we're seeing, what those trends are, and really try to quantify that. And so from that report, they found that there was an average of 20 wrong-way driving crashes annually. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you consider that most of these are head-on collisions, they can be very severe and very important to try to mitigate and prevent. And probably to no one's surprise, they mostly happen in urban areas, specifically in Memphis and Nashville. But this report did not only want to investigate the crashes, it also wanted to recommend a way forward to actually start to mitigate those through technology. So from the research team, thermal detection, using that heat signature to actually verify that there is a wrong-way vehicle, not just a shape coming on with a camera. So thermal detection, radar detection, and LED-enhanced blinking wrong-way signs were the most effective components of a wrong-way prevention system. So that gave us an idea of kind of where we wanted to start in our actual project design. This slide here just kind of gives some background on the statistics. Again, the chart on the left shows the number of events per year, trending at about 20 per year. And then on the right side, you have those results broken down by county, with Shelby at the top, which is the city of Memphis, and then Nashville, which is Davidson, below that. So in developing this project, the first step was really to select a project location. There were different areas across the state that were considered, but I-40 and I-240 in Memphis was essentially the winner. This is the corridor, I-40 and I-240 in Memphis, 5 interchanges with 10 ramps. This was in the county with the highest number of wrong-way crashes, which made it a prime place to test this out. We were also confident that these ramps experienced wrong-way driving behavior. In the analysis of the wrong-way crashes, it is kind of difficult to figure out what actually caused those incidents, because you really have to trace that those crashes actually were the result of someone going the wrong way, because they may have already gone downstream by that point. So in this location, we were confident that there was that behavior being experienced. They also have a lot of complicated geometry. Doug will get into that in a little bit. So if the system can work here, it can pretty much work anywhere in the state. There's also some feedback from the TMC, the regional traffic engineering offices, and then Nashville was the second on the list, but we wanted to avoid that area because there were some other initiatives going on that could impact our analysis of this system. All right, so with that, I'll go over to Doug to talk about project design.
All right, thanks. So I'm going to start off by just talking through some of these locations that Cam mentioned. So as he mentioned, we had 5 different interchanges with 10 ramps. So the one on the top left is Chelsea Avenue. If you're familiar with Memphis, it's the north-south portion of I-40, I-240 that runs in the downtown area, just east of the river. So it's I-40 on the north, and then I-40 actually cuts west in the middle of our segment over into Arkansas. And then it's 240, the south portion, which actually turns into I-55 going south into Mississippi. So this is a segment that actually leads into 2 different states, depending on where those vehicles come or go to. So on the north, you've got Chelsea Avenue. On the next one is Jackson Avenue. Then you've got Lamar Avenue, South Parkway, and then one on the south is the Norris Road exit right before 240 hits 55 as it's coming into the Memphis area. So it shows you some of the existing ITS infrastructure that's along the corridor. One of the other reasons why this was a good corridor to choose is there's a good network, a good baseline of infrastructure along the corridor, like CCTV cameras, DMS unit, DMS signs, so that we could leverage that with our technology to bring in other components that were already out there and reduce the cost of building a fully functional system. There was one gap. We went out and checked gaps of coverage. One of the goals when you have one of these systems is to be able to visually confirm that you have a wrong way driver. None of these systems are really 100% accurate. You will have some false calls. And so whether that's an animal or maybe a maintenance truck backing down the interstate ramp or a police vehicle. And so it's important for our TMC operators to be able to lay eyes on the situation and know and confirm that it is a wrong way driving situation. So we had one location up at the Chelsea Avenue where we didn't have coverage of that northernmost ramp, and so we're installing one more CCTV camera as a part of this project as well. I'm going to show you a couple videos of, this looks really dark, it's obviously at night, but you'll see these systems come on. So these are 2 videos from Arizona that show fully functioning systems and how they respond in a wrong way driving scenario. So it should start playing. What you'll see is these LED flashing wrong way signs. Now these are actual RFB units that they've used, but you see a wrong way driver, they see the signs or see the flashing lights and immediately self-correct on the ramp. So one of the primary responsibilities or goals of this system is to actually make the driver aware that they're making a wrong movement. They come off the screen and you actually see a right-way driver coming on the screen on the left. So you can imagine if that system wasn't there, if that vehicle had continued down that ramp and onto the main line, what might have happened, right? So we had a self-correction. These systems have about an 87%, based on research done out in Arizona with some of the systems they have, of self-correction. So you're avoiding a potential head-on collision on a main line that typically will result in a fatality. Hopefully it's less than that, but a lot of times these end in fatalities, unfortunately. This next video is during the day. You'll see the lights start flashing because there's a vehicle that's coming the wrong way. The first one you saw him self-correct on the ramp. This one is a truck coming on with a trailer with some pretty big equipment on it. So you can imagine what would happen, and you can see a car coming the other direction, right? You can imagine what would happen if that vehicle didn't know they were going the wrong direction and continued down that ramp, picking up speed as they're heading to the main line. This guy realizes it, gets to the end of the ramp, and then self-corrects onto the main line, going the right direction. So there's a couple different ways. You can see him pull over onto the shoulder, wait for a gap in traffic, and then make the U-turn to get onto the main line going the right direction. But again, we've taken this guy, we've notified him that he's done something wrong, and he's able to self-correct and hopefully avoid a terrible situation in the down the line.
So how much are the signs and actuations just for something that simple?
I'll tell you for our system, it depends, right? Our system is a fully integrated system that's going to be fully integrated into ATMS software, have a lot of automated responses built in. I think later on we have an estimate somewhere around $2 million for our whole project, right? Around $3 million. So, I mean, 10 ramps, it was 300,000 total for all of it. But if you were not do a fully integrated system, it'd be a lot cheaper than that, right? I mean, you're probably talking you got to have some detectors. You'd have to have some vendor supplied software out there where we can use our TMC software. So you might be talking about 50, 60,000 on a ramp to integrate a system. So maybe that's $2,007 and now it's like, 300,000 for a ramp. I don't know. So the first thing we did, as Cam mentioned, was we went through a systems engineering analysis to kind of answer all the questions of how and what and when, and I'll take you through that in just a second. These are the different aspects of the systems engineering analysis that we went through. Stakeholder engagement was a huge part, and I'll take you through that in the next slide. One thing I want to put on this is peer exchanges. Wrong way driving is kind of all over the place at the moment as far as types of detectors and systems and fully integrated or standalone systems. We connected with Arizona DOT. They've got a lot of these deployed across the state. So we connected with them, had a peer exchange with them to understand their operations, their different types of equipment that they have, lessons learned as they implemented these systems so that TDOT could be smart and make some of those smarter decisions learning from previous mistakes. We also connected them with Florida DOT. So as a part of this, in the middle of our project, TDOT was actually implementing new software in the TMC using SWIRI. They were implementing SWIX. Florida uses SWIRI as well, and they've got wrong-way systems, so they have their SWIRI module already developed and in place. So we kind of understand the software side of things before TDOT launched into this project as well. Project stakeholders, there were a lot of people to coordinate with. Who's going to do what, right? That's one of the biggest questions, and when. You'll see some of these divisions are still named that way in TDOT, some of them aren't. We went through this project in the middle of reorg in TDOT, right? And so we were constantly kind of changing and figuring out who we were going to be talking to, but it was important for everybody to be at the table to understand who was going to be doing what and when, and get their ideas of what the goals were for the system as well. The concept of operations, like I mentioned, answers a bunch of questions. The why, the first priority was to notify the wrong way driver and hopefully get them to self-correct, like I already mentioned, right? It's awareness of the situation to the driver itself. Secondly was responding. If we could speed up knowing that a wrong way driving event was happening on our system, we could respond quicker. And so those were the two primary functions that we identified with TDOT as goals of this system. And then we started answering all the questions about what are the different elements that we're going to have, right? The thermal detectors, the LED flashing wrong way signs, CCTV cameras, DMS messaging. You'll see all that in just a second. The other pretty critical component is the sequence of events, right? There's a lot of things you can do when you have a system like this, a lot of automated responses that can happen. You can post DMS messages, you can get CCTV cameras to pan to preset locations so you can have immediate eyes on the ramp. So it was pretty important for us to understand what everybody wanted to happen automatically and then what they wanted to be able to control manually, right? So like if it's a confirmed wrong way driving event, then the TMC operator can hit a button and all these automated response plans would happen. But there are some things that you want to happen immediately, right? Like the LED flashing signs. And the moment a vehicle is detected, you want those coming on because you want to be able to make the driver aware that he's made a mistake. So we went through that sequence of events with them and started developing how we wanted everything to operate and ultimately got to a concept diagram. At the very center of this is the ATMS software, so everything is communicating back to the TMC. And then the operator is still there, sitting there making a decision. They wanted some manual verification of the process. They didn't want all these things happening. People getting text messages or emails within TDOT that there's a wrong way driving event happening without somebody saying yes, confirming it is. So at the heart of this is still a manual operation of a TDOT TMC operator confirming that it is a wrong way driving event. There's a lot of other stuff that's automated, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the LED flashing signs come on. So at the top is our primary zone, and you'll see this as we go into a couple slides later where these lay out. But it's the primary zone of what all happens. So when a a vehicle is detected in our primary zone, those LED flashing lights come on. We do have a CCTV camera that automatically pans to give the TMC operator eyes on that ramp. And then we also have some automatic alerts that go out, whether that's to the TMC operators or other people within TDOT, or even at some point we do get to the point where Memphis Police or THP, Tennessee Highway Patrol, get alerts as well. The next box, the second gray box, is our secondary zone, and we have some things that are identified as automatic and manual type responses that are in there, and then the bottom one is a main line. So we do have detectors on the ramps, but we also have detectors on the main line, and I'll talk about why we have those in just a minute. So here are our system components. Like I mentioned earlier, LED flashing wrong way signs is one of the critical components to make the driver aware of what's going on. Our thermal cameras, those were recommended under that research project that Cam talked about, so we already kind of knew what our type of detector was going to be. CCTV camera coverage, DMS use, right way driver messaging. So there's the message that goes out, right? You want to make the wrong way driver aware with the flashing LED signs, but then what do you put on the sign to tell a right way driver that something's going on ahead, right? Do you tell them to move left? Do you tell them to move right? Do you tell them to get off the interstate? Do you tell them, well, ultimately what research has shown is you don't tell them to do anything because you don't know where that wrong way driver is going to be. Most of the time they move to the right-hand side of the road, which is the left-hand side of the road for the right way driver. And so we developed messaging for what those right way drivers are going to see on the DMS sign. And then one thing we added is the LED backlit do not enter signs. That's a preventative measure that'll go at the top of the ramp. If you're familiar with TAPCO, has a Legend Viz sign, which is just a backlit LED do not enter sign. We're adding those to all the top of the ramps as well to hopefully deter people from even making the wrong movement onto the ramp before they even reach our system as well. So here's a typical equipment layout. This kind of tells you where those different zones are that I was mentioning earlier. So the primary zone is at the top of the ramp, right near the arterial side street. So that's to help us detect a wrong way vehicle making that movement onto the ramp the moment they get onto the ramp. So that, again, activates your LED flashing signs and hopefully is allowing them to self-correct and not make it further down the line. Our secondary line is the confirmation zone. We're using it to track to understand what vehicles are not self-correcting. So if they trigger the first one and don't trigger the second one, if the TMC operator didn't get there in time and they self-corrected, they can know they self-corrected because they didn't trigger that second zone. But if they do trigger the second zone, then we know they've moved towards the main line. And so now if they've confirmed that they've hit a second zone, now we know we're probably in a wrong way driving situation and we need to respond. The main line are to track them. So we've got 5 different interchanges like I mentioned. So if they get on at the southernmost interchange, we can track them with a main line as they trigger them as they go down the corridor. However, like I mentioned earlier, we do have different interstates that bisect our corridor coming from Arkansas, I-40. We also have I-55 that's coming up from the south. And so, like Cam mentioned, it's hard to understand wrong way driving if you don't have detectors or the ability to track these vehicles. You know where the crash happened, but you don't know where they got on going the wrong way. And so for us having a pilot corridor, we needed to understand, if there was a crash that happened on our corridor, a head-on crash, we need to understand, did our detector miss it on an upstream ramp, or did they come from off of our pilot corridor? So we've got these positions to be able to track. If they came on our corridor from the south, or came in from Mississippi, or from the west, from Arkansas, we would know that based on those mainline detectors tracking them. We also developed operational scenarios, what's going to happen in each of these scenarios. So there's a lot of decisions that can be made depending on what the driver does, right? So the first one is what happens if the wrong way driver self-corrects at that initial zone. They trigger, they see the lights, they turn around like we saw in that first video. Does the TMC operator care? Do we deploy Memphis Police to go pick them up and see what's going on? Most of the time, these happen at night. They happen with drivers that are under the influence, or they happen with elderly drivers that maybe didn't take medication. That's based on a lot of research that's done. You see a lot of those things. So Memphis Police have said we may want to stop them anyway, even if they self-correct. So Memphis Police wanted a notification that, hey, we did have a wrong way driver, even though they did self-correct. I don't know that they can get out there quick enough to track them down, but they wanted that information. Secondly, what happens if they self-correct at the confirmation zone, right? Like you saw in the second video. What if you turn and go in the right direction of the main line? What do we do? So we kind of worked through all these scenarios, workshopped them with all of the stakeholder group, like I mentioned earlier, and figured out what each group expected to happen and how we could leverage technology to make that easier. All the way down, like I said, if we're now in a wrong way driving situation in scenario 3 where they've proceeded and they're on the main line, 4 if they get off, and they get off on one of those arterial roads, now they're going the wrong way on an arterial road, or what if they leave our corridor and go to another state, or continue on another main interstate. There's a lot of different scenarios that we had to flesh out and figure out exactly what was going to happen within the system. So I'm going to take a few minutes to just talk through the geometric challenges that Cam mentioned earlier. So the interstate, the image on the bottom left is the northernmost, Chelsea. It's a straight, short ramp. So pardon my pun, but it was pretty straightforward for us. Single pole, I'll show you the plan. It was really easy to get all of our detectors on a single pole and figure that ramp out. The one on the right is South Parkway, full cloverleaf on the top right, and the bottom right is zoomed in on the top right portion of that. This is a unique ramp. You have a ramp from the interstate coming in, and it's actually tying into a one-way local street. You can see it coming in on the right-hand side. And there's driveways to a gas station on this one-way section. So this is one of those confusing geometric situations that you probably have people coming out of that driveway. Maybe they turn onto that ramp and now they're going in the right direction on the interstate. These can happen really easily, really quickly when you have confusing geometry like you see here. But one of the questions was, where do you put your primary detection, right? And so we've got it placed actually after the gore, so we know if they enter the ramp going the wrong direction, because we went out there and watched it. And what you actually see, I mean, we're in Memphis, so those West Tennessee haters can talk about the Memphis drivers, right? I guarantee you people come out of that driveway and go into that neighborhood going the wrong direction all the time, right? So we don't want this thing triggering every time somebody does that. So we had to make sure that we put it in a place where we really understood where our wrong way driving scenario was occurring. This is another one, Jackson Avenue, where we had some sight distance issues. You can see the horizontal curve in the ramp. It actually has a vertical curve as well as you're going up, but that noise wall on the right kind of provided a blind sight line for our right-way drivers. So if there's a vehicle that's coming the wrong way down that ramp from the arterial, the right-way driver would never know it. They wouldn't see it around that noise wall. So this is a situation where we're implementing what's called an over-the-shoulder DMS sign. It's about a 5x6 sign over that shoulder, kind of in this right behind that guardrail, and it'll have a message to that right-way driver so that when somebody triggers that primary detection point and the LED flashing lights come on, this sign comes on, gives the right-way driver a message to give them caution ahead on ramp, or some kind of general message so they know to slow down and be careful. Just a couple plan sheets for the engineers in the room like me that like looking at construction plans. This is that Chelsea Avenue ramp. Like I said, that was a pretty short, straight ramp. We were able to have a single pole with 3 detectors on it. You can see our LED backlit do not enter signs. Those are the Legend Viz. TAPCO is our vendor, so you'll see these will be the Legend Viz signs that'll hopefully deter the wrong way driving events from even starting. We have our primary detection location, our first set. In this case, because it's such a short ramp, we only have one set of LED flashing wrong way signs here, and both sides of the lane. Our secondary confirmation zone, and then our main line zone. So this is the Jackson Avenue ramp that I showed you that had that sight line issue. In this case, we had to separate our detectors into 2 pole locations to get our primary and secondary zones. We do have 2 sets of LED flashing signs that'll both come on with that primary detection, and then we have our over-the-shoulder right-way DMS sign, like I mentioned earlier. So gives you an idea of kind of the components and the layout of what you'll see in this system. So I'm gonna pass it back over to Cam to talk you through schedule and next steps.
All right, thank you, Doug. Excuse me. Drink this weird canned water for a second. Excuse me. So yeah, project schedule. Right now we are developing the technical requirements for the software. That's in partnership with the Southwest Research Institute, or SWRI, the ones that develop the SmartWay Central software that our ITS system uses. The letting date was on May 9th of 2025 and was let in May of 25 for $2.9 million, so roughly about $3 million cost. Shelby Electric was selected as the contractor for the project, with TAPCO as the wrong-way equipment vendor. This is an interesting relationship just because they're doing a project of a very similar scale and scope right across into Arkansas. So I believe that probably helped with the cost of this project as well. So they were able to be a little bit underbid what we expected for the project, which is not too often these days. In terms of construction, started in September of 2025, just with some preliminary activities. We're looking to actually test the system in fall of 2026, and then hopefully have an operational system by the end of December of 26. So as we get into 2027 and beyond, I'm actually hoping to utilize some benefits from this system. In terms of next steps for TDOT, I really separate that into two different components. First, to evaluate, and then to expand. So for near term, evaluation is the key for that one. Having that continuous coordination between the different parties involved in the project, TDOT, the CEI, the contractor, SWERI, all the different divisions of TDOT to really install and integrate that wrong-way detection system correctly. Once it is finished in 2027, we definitely want to evaluate that system, making sure to validate it against what we expected it to do, how it's performing. Is it just giving us a bunch of false calls, or is it actually giving us successful detection? Are the TMC operators able to use it okay? Because they're probably the number one people that this system would benefit in terms of operability. And then also just making sure to keep those working relationships both internal to TDOT and external, such as the police departments that we could be giving information out to. And then long term, this really goes beyond the city of Memphis, so definitely trying to monitor wrong-way crash trends statewide, Jesus, at this project site and then across the state as well. Where are our next hotspots? We also want to keep up with new technology. That report was done in 2021. By the time this system is operational, I'm sure the technology has changed quite a bit, and probably has changed even so since now to then. So making sure that whatever we do in the future utilizes those new technology solutions, if this system especially is not performing the way that we want it to. Then of course just overall use these lessons learned statewide as we deploy to locations across the state to make sure that we stay off of those top 10 lists that we don't want to be on. So I guess with that, that's our presentation, and I guess we'll open up for any questions and get ready for the next presenter.
Where's the location in Arkansas? Is it right across the bridge, or is it?
There's a significant, it's a lot larger than ours, but it's I-40 on the other side of the bridge. Yeah, I think it's from Memphis to Little Rock. It's a pretty long system, yeah. And their contractor, it was actually it's Inline and Shelby are kind of joint with TAPCO. Ours just is Shelby and TAPCO, so there's a little bit of difference, but it's pretty much the same team, which is helpful.
You know, for the historical crash data in our state, any thoughts on how much of those end in a fatality? How often is it someone loses their life?
I am not sure. Do you know any
I don't
stats for
off the top
that?
of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a majority of them.
Most
I know
of the
that.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a high majority of them. So.
Right here.
From the research, was there any?
I don't think that they got much from the actual types of the causes for it, mostly just the investigation of where we're seeing it and how much across the state.
Yeah, there generally are out there, like your typical, like diamond interchanges are less likely than like some of your cloverleaf ramps, and I mean, some of the ones you saw just add even more complexity to that, right? But there is some general guidance out there as far as what types of interchanges do lend themselves more towards wrong-way driving, but our research didn't necessarily get into that because there are other documents that kind of cover that.
Right. Anything else? Right.
I saw your plan drawing had H7 the number. Y'all even
Not that I'm aware of, at least not right now. Anything else? All right. Thank y'all so much.
All right, give us 1 second. We got to make a quick switch. We're good.
And it shows me. Oh, goodness. So it should not be different for what it says, right? Yep. Do you see it there? Do you have it now? Do you want to try it with yours again? Something else?
Anyone have a USB that we can quickly borrow?
I won't have that's the reason I couldn't bring it. I don't have the USB thing. It does not make any sense. It does not make any sense.
Okay, we're going to pivot a little bit and try to figure out how to get her presentation to work. I think Joe, if you want to, hey Joe, do you want to? Sorry, we're gonna skip ahead in the program and then come back.
Our speakers for the next one.
Oh, yeah, are y'all ready? Okay. Sure. Sorry about that. Thank you.
As our speakers come up, on my comment, I meant to say it earlier. didn't notice there was a specific theme for this meeting, but I think I'd like to ad lib that the theme for this meeting could be partnerships. Think of all the partnerships we've talked about today. Not only this partnership between Tennessee section and Georgia section of ITE, we talked about GDOT and TDOT. We're about to hear more about that. Georgia DOT and the ARC and GDOT with locals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's really a very key important thing to point out. As for our next speakers, we have three speakers for this next presentation. It's called Bridging State Lines with State Route 5, State Route 68 in a roundabout way. It's kind of a catchy phrase. I know it's a little on the east side of the southern border of Tennessee. In fact, I've been in a restaurant where you go to the restroom, you're in a different state near here. But as for our three speakers, we have Robert DiPietro. He's been in the AE industry for over a decade, and he's a lead roadway engineer and deputy project manager with Jacobs in Atlanta. He works on the I-285 Top End Express Lane project in Atlanta, an autonomous vehicle project, and multiple roundabouts and widening projects throughout the state of Georgia. He's also been assigned to this project he's going to be talking about, State Route 5, for 2 years, trying to bring it from preliminary stage to construction. He's an honor graduate from Georgia Tech, a BS in Civil, married with 2 young children. He and his family enjoy road trips together to explore America's national parks. Second, we have Ethan Mobley. He serves Northwest Georgia as a project manager for GDOT. He's a graduate in Biosystems Engineering from Auburn, War Eagle. I went to Auburn. And has been managing transportation improvement projects since fall of 22. He currently manages multiple corridor widening projects, including widening of State Route 53, business in Jasper, State Route 20 between Cartersville and Canton, and this project we're about to talk about today on State Route Georgia 5. We also have Jeremy Bryson. He's a PM with Region 2 for TSITE. He's a graduate of Kennesaw State with a degree in political science. He spent the last 16 years serving Catoosa County as a PM for transportation improvement projects. He managed their transportation department before being part of TDOT in May of this year. He's a certified public works manager through UGA, and past branch president and division director for Northwest Georgia section of the Georgia chapter of American Public Works Association. He's a member of ASHE in Tennessee Valley. Married to Sherry. They have a daughter, Jaslyn, who attends the Reagan Middle School. Participates in school and all-star competition cheer. And I look forward to hearing your presentation of this exciting project.
Appreciate it. My name is Robert DiPietro. I'm here with Ethan and Jeremy. Today, I think, like you pointed out, it's talking about the partnerships that we've been working together with. On this project, it's been around for a while. That we're going to be talking about today is called what we refer to as the Tennessee Bypass. It's part of a larger widening project, which we'll kind of get into here. All right. For this, we really got to go back in time, all the way back to the late 90s. This is when GDOT was starting to consider improving the connection between Georgia and Tennessee between US 76 on the Georgia side and US 74 on the Tennessee side. They were looking to realign that SR5 corridor along the Toccoa River, so kind of shifting it east, as you kind of see in there. This project was moving forward, but because of some of those political implications, which tends to happen, you had the state legislature as well as the local officials, especially within McKaysville in there, the project started to change, and through those coordinations, it's become what it is today. And Ethan's going to go talk a little bit about that in his portion later, because in the presentation today, what we're going to be trying to focus on is talking about this project from our different perspectives. Me as Jacobs from the consultant, and then from the 2 different TOTs that have had to coordinate through this project. So zooming in a little bit more on our project history, you have to go back to 2015. That's when the combined project, which you see the 3 phases up there, began in about 2015 with the first concept report going in 2016. Through that coordination, through those changes, we had another concept report in 2018. And then 3 years later, that's when GDOT decided to have a revised concept report where we split the project from one large widening down to the 3 phases. This is just the cost, the schedule, really trying to see what they could move forward and build while the other 2 are coming behind it. So in this case, we have the 3 pieces. You'll see in blue here, the SR5 North of the Georgia Sidewalk project. This goes along SR5 North. It's fully within Georgia, all the way through downtown McKaysville. It's a widening and operation improvement project. You can see at the very end where McKaysville and Copper Hill meet at the Tennessee state line. It's a T intersection. It's really difficult for trucks to get through that area. It's very tight, a lot of downtown structures, downtown parking. So that's where the other piece comes in, the bypass. It's a new location road that's 2 phases. You'll see in green there, we call it the SR5 connector to Georgia bypass. That's fully on the Georgia side. It comes off a roundabout from the Georgia sidewalks. It goes all the way to the state line. And then from there, you have the 3rd phase, which is the one we're going to start highlighting starting the next slide. This one starts at the state line. It's called SR68 connector, because on the Tennessee side, you're connected into SR68 instead. This one comes down, bridges over the river, comes around the hill. You can see the loop there, and then ties into a roundabout at SR68. Kind of as I already noted, the first 2 phases, the blue and green, those are fully within Georgia. The 3rd phase is in Tennessee. Oh. Hold on, I think I skipped it. Yeah, there we go. So zooming in on the project. So this is just the Tennessee portion. This is phase 3. This is under design currently, moving towards a plan in hand plans next year. This project begins at the Georgia bypass at the state line, comes down, ties into SR68 at the roundabout, which you can see there. This project has a 1,300-foot steel bridge that'll go over, you see 2 roadways, a fairly large river, a 9-track rail yard, as well as Baltic Ave that comes up to the administrative offices on that parcel. Another fun part of this one is the end of the bridge where it ties down over there and loops around that hill. That existing parcel is a federally designated Superfund site. So that also added some extra coordination into the project. Did want to note this part when we'll talk about it a little bit more later too, is that the project is majority funded by GDOT, but it's going to be designed to TDOT standards and plan production, as well as it will be for TDOT to maintain afterwards. Some of the project challenges, if you haven't seen any already, or hopefully you've seen what we've already been dealing with, but there's some other ones that we also had to work through and really coordinate between the states. Environmental side of things. So you have the permitting, you had to work with the GDOT process and figure out what that TDOT permitting was going to look like. What kind of challenges are we going to be sitting there? We have a Superfund site, so what are the challenges that come from that? What type of mitigation, or what do you have to haul away if you're going to impact any of that site? Railroad coordination. So we're crossing a 9-track rail system. It's not that busy of one, but it's still owned by the railroad, as well as the existing roadway of SR68 falls within their property. So you already have easement. We're going to need future easement as well for that. And for what I was already talking about too, you have 2 state processes that we're trying to merge together. GDOT's paying for this project, so we have to work through their procurement process, but trying to make sure we're setting the schedule and the requirements that follow TDOT. So trying to figure out and bridge those gaps. The main thing really comes down to trying to figure out what that schedule is going to look like. We can talk about in similar words, and we can be saying different things, or we can be saying different things but talking about the same thing. So trying to figure out where those connections are and really figure out the cost and the schedule of this project and figure out how we get to the end goal. At this point, I'm going to talk about kind of more of a granular level with the disciplines. And I'm going to start with the roadway and the bridge design. For the roadway design, we had to accommodate a lot of different things, right? You have the adjacent project that you're tying into, you have the bridge, you have all the vertical clearances that come with that bridge. You have the roundabout and horizontal and vertical alignments for that. You're coming off the bridge, you're coming around that large loop, that large curve to the roundabout. Got to make sure you're not making it too steep. We're trying not to create an unsafe situation in the future for our drivers. You're trying to minimize a lot of your impacts. Those impacts to the railroad, you're bridging over this railroad, you're placing bents, construction around that, as well as those environmental impacts. You have the Superfund site, you have a river, and besides those two things, you still have streams and wetlands surrounding the project that you're trying to work around. As well as the right-of-way coordination. This project only has 12 or 13 parcels that were actually taken right-of-way from, or easements from, but 2 of those are the Superfund site and the railroad. The railroad is a pretty well understood process, and we all know it's going to take a little bit longer than normal. But the Superfund site adds a lot of unknowns that we had to work through and really coordinate with all those different disciplines within TDOT and within GDOT as well to try to figure out what's it going to take to buy that right away. How long is that process going to take? Surprise, it takes a while. For the bridge, like I said, you have a 1,300 foot long bridge. You have all those vertical clearances. You have to get over the railroad. You have to work around the river, which is a recreational river through there. So you have folks that are fishing, you have folks that are kayaking, swimming, tubing, all within this river that you have to work around. This bridge, it is a steel bridge with those concrete bends too. Well, in the next part, we kind of talk about the constructability. That played a big portion of our design. With the TDOT process, this does require a constructability meeting. And this was back in 2023 after we did our right-of-way plans at that time. I hadn't been part of the TDOT process before, but it's a very robust process, and I think it works really well. I'll talk a little bit about that too. They set up so for those that don't know, for those in the GDOT hemisphere, they invited the TDOT folks, invited our GDOT folks as well as the consultant that's working on it, S. Jacobs. And then they invite and share the plans as they currently are with 4 different contractors. And from there, they set up meetings with those contractors, allow them to look at it, and then allow them to present their concerns and their suggestions. And then we can have that conversation with them to figure out what they're going to need to construct that, whether that's space through right-of-way and easements, is that down here, some of their concerns, where are they going to fabricate this steel? How are they going to get it to the project? This is in North Georgia and South Tennessee. It's mountainous, it's curvy. It's difficult to get those big pieces out there. We have some pretty big spans within our bridge. How do you get that steel out there? Constructing it near the river. Our bents are not in the river, but they're next to it. So do they need jetties to construct this? Where would they want to place their crane systems? The crane pads, how big are the cranes? Those are all questions that we were working through with them. Some contractors needed larger cranes because they wanted to do with less. Others wanted smaller cranes. And that all changed how much of that easement we were going to need. And their goal was always to reduce their impacts to those parcels from the construction side if they could. So through those conversations, we were able to help set that footprint for the project. And that way, later on, the goal is that that they have what they need. They don't need to go back to TDOT, or they don't have to use more expensive methods to construct this because we didn't give them enough space. The next area that is not surprising is the environmental coordination. This has been a very big part, and we're still working through some of these items. First item you have is that Superfund site is a copper mine, or an old copper mine. So your first thought's probably, of course, that's a Superfund site. There's all those chemicals from the copper mine, but that's not really what was designated at a Superfund site. It was the acid-producing rock that was underground. This rock is, once water infiltrates the ground or rain comes, if you expose that rock and rain hits it, there's a material in there that will dissolve slowly over time and or decrease the pH of the water, making it acidic, which then kills the vegetation and the animals within the water. It goes in the streams, which are right next to the Ocoee River, and therefore flowing into that. So once you start exposing that dirt or you mess with the groundwater, it's an environmental impact at that point. So working through that, determining how much cut we're going to need through there and how we're going to haul that off. Do you haul it? Do you mitigate it? All those questions have to be answered. And some of that stuff we're still working through. We have a plan right now, but there's still things that as you go, you have to be flexible. Ecological mapping and those impacts, of course. You have the Ocoee River, you have streams, you have wetlands that feed into it. So it's not just that Superfund site, it's the other piece of the project. What streams are you impacting and that kind of stuff. Bat habitats as well as historical impacts. Those two things, compared to the others, might not seem as large, but they're still important. So it's things we have to double check. With historical impacts, we have the Baltic Ave that leads up to the old administrative building. Our bridge is over that now. Originally we were impacting it, now we're bridging over it to help leave in place some of those historical impacts. The next discipline I'm going to talk about, and this is the last one for myself to talk about disciplines, but is the geotechnical coordination. So we have the ESA phase 1 and 2. You have bridge foundations, culvert foundations, wall foundations, as well as that geotechnical report that tells you about the soils, about the acid producing material that's out there. All this is, there was a lot of drilling and it took a very long time because it's out in a very rural area and it is hilly. So you can't have a lot of different drill rigs out there if you can even find that many to get out there. So it's a huge undertaking that our geotech sub-consultant had to get done. And you run into these communication barriers sometimes where we're engineers, we love our acronyms, and your acronym doesn't necessarily line up with the other state. You're talking about the same report, but then for example, you have GDOT, you have Bridge Foundation Investigation. Okay, that's pretty easy to figure out, but if I'm just saying BFI over and over, everyone's going to look at me like I'm crazy. So you have to figure out that naming convention and work through these different ones. Another example is with more on the environmental side. GDOT has what they call AOEs, but TDOT calls them technical studies. So working through all that has, and really bridging those communication barriers has been important. And then once you do that, then you have to figure out, okay, we're used to this GDOT way of doing things, but that's not necessarily what TDOT does. So if someone from one place is reviewing it for someone else, the information that's stored in there and then the way it's presented is going to be different. So if there's really one theme that you get from our presentation today is communication, right? We have to make sure we understand what we're talking about and making sure that others also understand, because in the end we're working through our schedule and we're trying to get to the same goal, and we're all in this together. So it's really just trying to work through that as a team. And that kind of brings me to my final part before I hand it over to Ethan here, is talking about that by state coordination and working through that. Like I said, GDOT's that lead agency. They're the project sponsor. They're the ones paying for the majority of the project, but TDOT will be letting the project, and they're going to be responsible for maintaining it. So when it is complete, so how do we work through that? And I'm going to let them talk through that. The project's going to follow those TDOT standards and guidelines, and then but the schedule is being set by GDOT. Now you have to work within that TDOT to align those processes. So how do we do that? How long does things take to be reviewed? How long is it going to take to complete this stuff? How's the review process differ? Through this project, we also had TDOT updated to the project delivery network, the PDN network. So we had to kind of play with that shift as well as we worked through that. So from there, I'm gonna hand it over to Ethan and let him give you guys his perspective from the GDOT side of things.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday Junior, right? What does that mean tomorrow is? It's Friday? So you guys are excited, right? Well, thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be here in Chattanooga in Tennessee. I've been on a lot of Teams calls with folks in Tennessee, so I was actually on a Teams call today with folks in Georgia, but I was in Tennessee, so that was a nice little change up. Today I'll be sharing with you the significant events and the story of this project's past that have brought us to this unique place we're at in the present, right? Before I do that, I want to send out a thank you to Ms. Sonja Thompson, Ms. Kimberly Nesbitt, Nicole Law, Ms. Cynthia Burney, and Mr. Nabu Nagash. These are the previous project managers for this decades-long project, and my job now is to regret that it's been a decades-long project and try to get it to the finish line. So as Robert mentioned, this project was planned in the late 1990s as a 4-lane connection between two Appalachian development corridors. You can see highlighted US 74 and 76. Originally, impacts were thought to be too severe within that existing alignment of Georgia State Route 5 because it was constructed along a ridge line. So you guys see a 2D map. There's a lot of topography here. This is certainly a mountainous area, right? It should be noted that although State Route 5 is considered to be a rural corridor between Blue Ridge and McKaysville, it's not an empty corridor. There are houses all along this roadway. They have small setbacks from the shoulder, so they're right up close. With these potential impacts, a realignment to make it a 4-lane was considered. This realignment was planned to start tangentially off the first curve leading Blue Ridge to the north, and then thread northeast between the Toccoa River you can barely see to the east of SR5, and then between the existing alignment. This would then intersect the existing corridor to the north, just south of McKaysville, proceed northwest on the west side of the existing alignment, just to the left of downtown McKaysville and Copper Hill, and then tie back into the existing 4-lane in Tennessee. So that's northwest of Copper Hill. So with this plan, however, the city of Copper Hill, Tennessee was thought to be a historic district by the state of Georgia. Yet by Tennessee, it was considered to merely possess a few historic features. This distinction prevented significant impacts in this area at a time when the development process for highway plans was much more rigid. We didn't have alternative funding mechanisms like we do now. Later significant changes stemmed from local opposition to the alignment. So once the historic impacts were resolved, the plan to bypass downtown McKaysville, Georgia and Copper Hill, Tennessee, and then tie back to the existing 4-lane in Tennessee was shared again with the locals. Their public opposition was from their concern that we would eliminate regional tourism. This is a mountainous area. There's a ton of kayaking, a lot of restaurants, a lot of holiday shopping. Additionally, the idea of creating a new alignment instead of widening the existing SR5 in Georgia was disliked by the locals. There was many local citizens' opinion that a parallel roadway would do nothing to ease the issues, improve the safety and operability of those that have to use that existing alignment. Again, there are a ton of houses along this corridor. They have to use that roadway. By working with the locals to determine the specifics of their needs, a project that threads the needle through difficult topography and onto a contaminated area, as Robert mentioned a few times, with Superfund, EPA Superfund designation became the most desirable alignment out of all the alternatives. Please note, these project changes really would have stalled out. We would have had a project that was filed away, no one else would have looked at it again, if we'd not seen such strong local advocacy from our Georgia communities. Several years after this first project was taken out of active development, some of these representatives, some concerned citizens, even state reps in Atlanta, began to inquire again about the corridor project. The idea that the project was stalled was simply unacceptable. Even with historic impacts, environmental impacts, difficult terrain, agency disagreement, it was still unacceptable. So the project was brought under development again. It was split into multiple segments. Again, as Robert said, so the construction could begin on other parts while the more difficult issues were resolved. However, just as mountains are never moved by will alone, the corridor stalled for many reasons. the project would still be challenged to secure funding for the extensive improvements to mitigate the impacts, to retain local support, and to work across state lines. Speaking of working across state lines, this effort is unique compared to other bi-state projects. Common bi-state projects in Georgia include bridge replacements or bridge improvement projects, intuitively because state lines typically run along rivers. As a state on one side of that state line develops a desire to replace the bridge, typical agreements are carried out to design and review the bridge plans, but to depend on the neighboring state for minor acquisition of right-of-way, for indents, for approach slabs, etc. But this project's bi-state coordination happens for multiple reasons. This segment of the project is fully within Tennessee, but as Robert mentioned, majority sponsored by the state of Georgia. This condition led our team to multiple questions. One, what design standard is going to be employed, Georgia DOT or Tennessee DOT? Two, what agencies will be used for environmental coordination for that NEPA document? The Georgia agencies due to its sponsorship, or the Tennessee agencies due to its location? Secondly, what branches of the federal governments? The Georgia branch or the Tennessee branch? You guys can go ahead and take your guesses now. Go ahead and place your wagers. I'll answer it in 2 slides. 3, what mechanism will be used to transfer the funds from Georgia and to relay the ownership of the project between the states? To answer these questions, we must begin with the last question of project ownership and work our way backwards. Though many of the project activities could be performed by Georgia DOT staff and our consultants, the acquisition of real estate to be used for the project's right-of-way could not be performed by Georgia team members. That may be intuitive, but there are multiple legal issues that prevent this. The first of which, there are applicable laws for acquisition of real estate that GDOT and our other Georgia agencies that we employ for transactions in the state of Georgia, they don't apply to us in other states. We don't have those same advantages to use eminent domain and so on and so forth in another state like we do in Georgia. Secondly, the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution says that states cannot enter into agreements with other states on their own. Agreements that may be required to obtain property from the state of Tennessee cannot be executed without United States congressional approval. And so this transition of ownership may literally have required an act of Congress. As such, agreements were developed with the Tennessee DOT for their agents to conduct that right-of-way acquisition, for their own funds to be used to a set value, and then for them to retain ownership and perform maintenance of the project within that right-of-way after the construction is completed. Following this significant resolution, thanks to Tennessee's collaborations to own and maintain the project, it was then simple to answer the previous questions. This ownership status led to the determination that Tennessee DOT managed the project letting, handled the contractor inspection. With that finding, Tennessee design and review standards would be followed to ensure that the project would be maintainable by their state, they could take on that infrastructure. Furthermore, following those project nods, and by the definition of agency jurisdiction, the Tennessee branches were used by each federal agency to be coordinated with, such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps of Engineers. And then a bi-state agreement was executed in 2021 detailing this and other project activities, with one more to follow, likely next year. Speaking of collaboration with the state of Tennessee, we've worked together through many hours of communication over these years, and for a perspective from their department, I'd now like to hand the floor over to our Tennessee project manager, Mr. Jeremy Bryson.
Thank you, Ethan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be part of such a unique project such as this one, and to be up here having this discussion on behalf of TDOT. As mentioned in the previous slides by Robert and Ethan, TDOT is serving as the letting agency and will carry the project through the bidding, award, construction phase, and then we will also be responsible for maintenance after the project is complete. So therefore, this project's going to follow the Tennessee process for delivery. A few years ago, TDOT shifted the delivery process to the Project Delivery Network, or more commonly known as the PDN. For those that are not familiar with this process, you can find this on the TDOT website or by doing a simple Google search for TDOT PDN. I would encourage everyone, if you're not familiar with it, to get familiar, because this is the way TDOT is delivering projects moving forward. And the PDN is a topic that could be a whole presentation in and of itself, but for this discussion, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of what the PDN is. This slide here pretty much represents the workflow of the project delivery process. Each stage has specific milestones. Once completed, the project is in and then moves to. Stage 1 is the context and scoping phase. Also, previous version of the PDN also included, it now includes the concept version that was put in this last year with the new update. Concept originally had its own stage, which we called stage 0, but that's been incorporated in stage 1. In this stage, the project team is defined and established, and then also critical goals and intended outcomes for the scope, schedule, budget, quality, and risk for the project. Stage 1 also initiates the roadway design and produces what we call the line and grade set of plans. Once we complete the stage 1, we move to stage 2, which is now called the functional design plans, formerly known as right-of-way plans. The team references these plans to begin the right-of-way phase of the project. A lot of things kick off in this stage. It starts obviously the right-of-way phase. Also kicks off a lot of environmental things, also some utility coordination as well. So stage 2, when we get the footprint established, that is a big stage in this process. As we move into stage 3, which is this project is currently sitting at the tail end of stage 2, hopefully initiating the right-of-way phase towards the end of this year. We're going to be moving into the plan in hand design, where hopefully all the previously identified risks have been mitigated and plans are getting complete at this stage. All design work should be, for the most part, completed at the end of this phase, having all permits, right-of-way, utility relocation, and local agreements in place or almost in place at the end of this phase. In stage 4 moves the project closer to the letting phase as we get into the plans, specifications, and estimates. All necessary environmental permits, right-of-way, local agreements are in place at this phase as the project is heading to letting. And then it moves into stage 5, which is construction. And what makes the PDN unique is that as you move through each stage, every discipline is involved. There's a lot of coordination as you're moving forward, a lot of monthly progress meetings as we're starting to hit these milestones, a lot of team collaboration. So every discipline that you see here in the color-coded box, they're all represented in all these meetings. So one of the things too is if you click on any of these boxes, it kind of sort of lines out each role and responsibility of those disciplines. So how specifically does the PDN work? By clearly defining discipline roles at each phase of the delivery process with consistency and transparency, and enables project teams to improve reliability and efficiency. The project teams are the heart and soul of the PDN. Teams are built with each discipline providing team members to represent right-of-way, environmental, roadway design, geotech, and many other disciplines involved in a large-scale project, such as the one we have. Coordination and communication are essential in this approach, and it allows disciplines the opportunity to collaborate and pursue the project success as a team. Once the team is established, the PDN serves as a guide to assist them. It helps the project manager and team define key deliverables to build a schedule the team can follow and identify opportunities for multidisciplinary collaboration through each stage of the process. As Robert previously mentioned, this project has many challenges that need to be overcome in order to keep the project on schedule. The Superfund site hotness has recently been identified as it affects the right-of-way and environmental permitting process. So probably 2 or 3 main critical path items. The Superfund site, determining exactly what that consisted of, was one of those. We're finalizing, getting mitigation plans in place with our geotechnical staffs, both from the Jacobs side and from the TDOT geotechnical, so that way we can come up with a good plan for mitigating all the APM that we're finding there. So far, that's all we're finding, so that's kind of common in this area from what I'm understanding. So that's definitely one of them. The environmental process is also another critical path item. We have to get permits and things like that ready. Also in this area, there's mitigation and purchasing credits and how all that stuff works. So we're collaborating between the 2 agencies, and GDOT is preparing the permits and applications for the Army Corps, TDEC, and TVA. And then TDOT's role is to review the applications and assist with the templates to expedite this process. So they're preparing everything, and then TDOT is reviewing to make sure that it's how they would put one together to send to these agencies. And then finally, we're in the process of getting our functional design plans. Those have been approved, and we're going to be moving into the right-of-way phase. So there's a lot of processes to get that. Getting the functional plans approval is one of those. We just recently got that. So that way we can get right-of-way authorized, and then the railroad coordination and bridge design's underway now, but the coordination with the railroad's another critical path item. So hopefully we can get those 3 knocked out and keep this project moving forward. TDOT's project team is reviewing everything to ensure the project meets our specifications, but at the same time providing critical guidance to ensure these items are done correctly for the overall success of the project. So collaboration and assisting is at the, I guess, the centerpiece of this project, and we want to be a great partner. We want a great, successful project, one we maintain. So there's a vested interest in that, being in the state of Tennessee as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Ethan.
So in conclusion, as we consider these challenges, missteps, and advances made to progress this project, the commitment shown by both states' transportation departments and their multiple generations of project team members is consistently remarkable, in my opinion. As transportation agencies across our country change and new generations take on roles of service and roles of leadership, what role will they truly serve? Will these agencies adapt to the needs of our citizens, businesses, and communities, or will they make recurring excuses? Will they deliver projects that build our states, or will they find reasons that project delivery is just too difficult?
Further, we should ask ourselves, are we content with good enough? We should ask ourselves if we respect the work that we do, or if we think it's an unchanging industry that's too old to learn new tricks. This project is a prime example of partnered leadership between historic organizations that are driven by the needs of a local community and have shown consistent commitment across generations of this project team to face first of its kind challenges and accept that difficulty in order to deliver a project that has been desired for generations. That's the end of our presentation. If there's any questions, we can field those now, or we can take our break. All right, appreciate it. Thank you for having us today.